I guess we did get a rain recently.
Yeah, what'd they say? They got like 4 inches or something?
Oh, did they?
Yeah, remember they said they got a lot because we were like, holy shit, like we can't cross this. We're going to build a bridge.
You're saying 4 inches is a lot?
Yes. Isn't that the average?
Yeah.
No?
The HUNTR Podcast is brought to you by Deer Grow.
Man, it's almost food plot season, Jared, and Deer Grow is one of those products that has really changed the way that we plant food plots and the success we've seen from them.
No doubt. I've been, trying to plant food plots my entire whitetail hunting career, which is a little shorter than yours. But the minute that I started, or that I realized that I could get Deer Grow back into some of these remote plots where I couldn't get lime or fertilizer, especially in the 50-pound bag, format. Mm-hmm. So everything was changed. I could get into these spots moving forward with a backpack sprayer, and that's since escalated to these 40 or 60 gallon sprayers, and we're doing upwards of 5 to 10 acre food plots just with Deer Grow and having phenomenal success.
Yeah, and I mean with the price of fertilizer, lime, diesel, everything this year, I mean what better way to get in there and grow a successful food plot at about a third of the cost? Check out Deer Grow at deergrow.com. And we're back.
Hey,
HUNTR Podcast, episode 138.
As always, remember to like, follow, and subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, wherever you listen.
There you go. It is July the 13th. July the 13th.
I feel like I need to take I drank a lot of coffee on the way here.
Just wired.
Have you ever heard of this coffee called, I haven't broken it out yet, but I bought it the other day. It's called Death Wish.
No.
Yeah, it just got a big warning label on the front of the bag.
It's like, don't use it.
Bought it for Prime Day. I mean, I'm sure it's just a marketing play, but...
What did I see the other day?
Grinding that
it
up.
was, what the fuck was it? Is it like Jake Paul and Logan Paul's drink Prime? Is it Prime?
Yeah, with all the crazy caffeine in it.
Yeah, it just got hit with
like double the Red Bull caffeine amount.
Was it the FDA was just flagged it for like a review or something?
I saw something was cracking down on it.
Yeah, so
it's funny. Prime.
Get you. So yeah, that'll be interesting. Anyways, mid-July, and
that's gonna burst out of me.
You can say it.
We bought a farm.
Ah! Yeah, you can buy it.
I don't know if that's what you were looking for.
Yeah, that was it. That was it. You can say it.
Well, we're under contract.
We're under contract,
so I don't get the cart before. There are some things that need to happen here, but we're well on our way to owning a farm in Illinois.
We are. Yeah, crazy, man. We've I think we talked about it on the last couple. We had Bobby Kendall on, and I bought a farm, and we've made 2 trips to Illinois, one and then subsequently
back to back, pretty much. Wives were pretty cool about the first one. The second one was like, you're going again.
It's a bit of a stretch. I was just zapped by the time we got back from the second one.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that was a lot of driving back and forth, but paid off.
It was two Mondays in a row.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's a 9-hour drive out to this place.
Yep. So. Paid out. So we only looked at one farm the second time, which was what we thought was the farm. So I had a really good look at that, and then had a cool agent show us around, and ultimately we decided this is the one we want to try to pull off. It was not easy because the farm was actually off market.
Couple back and forths.
So it was off market, and a couple back and forths with the landowner, and some compromises for sure. But you do what you got to do to get the deal done.
Yeah.
But pretty stoked about it.
We're feeling good about it.
Yeah.
Some time has passed. Your offer was accepted. It's been a week, maybe.
Yes.
And
been a week.
I think we're, as soon as that happens, it's just like shooting a big buck. You start like, did I hit him right? Was it, So we start, digging back into the comps and, making sure we're, what we're getting into here. And it's like everything that we have turned up since is, I think it only made us feel better about where we're at with it. So
yeah,
it's exciting.
Not transparently way more than we thought we were going to spend.
And a bigger farm.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Not necessarily because of the per acre cost as much as the size of the farm.
Yeah.
We had gone in looking for that 80-ish.
That actually just sold this morning for more than we thought it was going to.
Yeah,
I was guessing $5,400 an acre.
Yeah, so we were looking
this
at...
is in Macoupin County?
Macoupin, yeah. We were looking at a Macoupin County auction that was going off. Mostly timber.
Some of you guys might have been watching the same one.
Yeah, maybe 14 acres or so of tillable, I think, on that farm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we were thinking like, we go in for 400-ish on that farm. That put us right around that 5,000 an acre mark.
Right.
And we didn't end up go out and looking at it because we found out that there was an outfitter adjacent. And again, no knock to the outfitters on that side, but we did a little bit of our own kind of undercover research there, and they weren't killing the quality of deer we were looking for.
Well, they are just a couple of years before we want to kill them. Yeah, no offense, obviously, but we just want to,
because there are giants in the area.
Our goal is to grow and kill giant deer ultimately, and being next to an outfitter is tough to do that. There's a lot of hunting pressure.
Yeah, you can't control it, and again, no knock, they're running a business, so. Yeah. So we were scheduled to go see that farm, and we bailed kind of last minute once we found some of this info.
Night before, I think. Day before.
Yep. And so we still decided to go out to Illinois. We
had some other listings we'd been watching. We had one of Bobby's Kendall's.
Yep.
We were looking at, and there was 2 other ones. We're like, it's in the right price range, right acreage. We didn't know about the area necessarily, but we're like, I'll just go. We were due for a trip, so that midsummer lull. We're like, let's just let's just drive, man.
Really rekindled the kind of mystique and importance of like knowing the area and the history, because I mean we saw some really good farms that transparently are like, man, this feels like it could be the farm, but like when you don't know what was on that farm, or you don't have any intel on what the neighborhood's like, it's a big risk. I mean, because you can't grow what's not there.
Yeah.
And again, to your point, just like that outfitter, like, I mean, they were killing good quality deer just at 3 years old usually.
Mm-hmm. Well, we were looking, basically on a premise of like, we thought it was undermarketed. It was like it was with like a tillable auction company, and there was no trail cam history or hunting history that was being promoted. We didn't know. And so like we looked at that as an advantage to us. We're like, hey, maybe people will overlook this one. And, they kind of did. I mean,
we found out this morning, kind of not. It went for $6,050 an acre this morning.
Yeah. So like 480 is what that 80 acres went for. And we don't know, it's just basically numbers in place of a name as to who bought that. So we don't know what their intention was, if it was a neighboring landowner. Or
could have had good timber on it too. That was the one thing one of the reasons we were going out to look at it was for a timber potential if there was white oak or walnut on it. We did see some in the pictures, but hard to tell. So yeah, I mean and I say that because, as much as we are purchasing this from a hunting standpoint, it's an investment from us. We talk about this on the bought a farm side of things a lot. This is an investment for us to take our family's money and put into this farm. Not necessarily because we're going to flip it around in 2 years or something, but we want an asset that continues to appreciate, and that's a smart investment for us. And transparently, because of the size of the farm, it's north of 140 acres. It puts us in a position where we have to get creative with how's this farm going to be able to make some money. So the farm that we ended up getting under contract has a substantial amount of CRP on it that's generating income, and a little bit of tillable that's still in farm production. But that farm, some of these other farms we looked at the first trip had no or little income production. Yeah. So I think that was a big decision. Even this farm that went on auction this morning maybe has timber, we don't know, but other than that, there's no income producing. So yeah, so those are the things that, we're trying to check the boxes off in our brains to say, well, we want a good hunting property. It's got to be in the good area. But ultimately, like, how are we going to pay for it? Because
long term,
at the end of the day, you got to figure out how you're going to pay for this thing long term.
Yeah, short term, I mean, money down. Like at a vacant land purchase like this, you're looking at 20% down.
20%. Yeah.
And the down payment is coming from you and I busting our balls for the past 10 years.
Yeah, I'm pulling from multiple sources.
Yeah, and it's there's been some big conversations with the wives and like looking at our own finances and to say like, is this the right decision? Yeah, yes, obviously it's super easy for me to say I want to kill the or buy a piece of property that's just the best hunting, period. And if you do that, like you can overpay for sure. I mean, there's it would be pretty easy to go in and say, I'll overpay for this thing, and to be able to do that. And we weren't willing to compromise. I mean, there's a level where we're like, well, what's the point here? Where it's still a good investment, but we're not going to compromise on like what we want to do. It's like we're not, it's not just an investment either. We want to be able to enjoy the crap out of it, like in the meantime.
Yeah.
And so
it's a tangible investment.
Boy, it just seems like, and we've yet to close here. So, I mean, hopefully everything goes smoothly from here. I mean, we're going to talk. There's a lot of
if you're listening to this, it should be early August. We probably aren't closed yet either.
Yeah.
We gave ourselves some time, and part of that was on the request of the landowner as well. So,
but trying to expedite it as as much as possible. There's really no reason to wait on our end. It does have a house on it. I don't know if you said that already, but
nope. And 2 pole barns.
And fortunately, like the house, based on what the realtor told us, like the valuation on the house would be, we're like, it's not going to be prettily,
Well, yeah, we were talking about, is it going to be worth trying to put money into to fix it up or just bulldoze it?
Yeah.
Before we saw it.
Is it even salvageable?
Yeah.
And so we were, I think, both really pleasantly surprised. Like when we went in there, we're like, this place is in a lot better shape than we thought. Like it's old, no doubt. Like the guy's been living there since the 50s, like his entire life. He's an older gentleman.
Yep.
And just clean, it didn't smell, no cracks in the foundation. Well, there's stuff,
couple
basically
things
like what you would expect, but like it's in good shape.
Yeah, better than we thought.
It's in good shape. There's a couple barns on it, some places for us to store some stuff. There's frankly a ton of equipment in there that we'll be interested to see. Once this guy eventually moves out, or he's towards the end of his life, transparently. So whatever the family decides to do with this stuff is kind of TBD. And in the meantime, this was like a big deal for our signing the contract here. So as soon as our offer was accepted, we have immediate access to the property.
Yeah, that was a big contingency for us because of the hunting aspect of it. Is that, from a food plot and tree stand and camera side, like we got to go.
Yeah.
It's time to go.
Yeah. It's like, if you're going to put food on a place like this, it's like, look at our date today and it's like we're late. And
there's a risk in it for us because, I mean, if for some reason this thing falls through and we don't get it, right, we've got money and time invested
into it. Yeah.
But we're pretty confident that everything is going to work its way out here. And again, we're pretty flexible on, like, we're going to get an inspection on the house, but it's not like we're contingent on like, hey, this needs fixed or this needs fixed. Because I think if anybody's listening to this, it hasn't gone through, kind of the property aspect of buying, like even if it has a structure, most of the time those properties are coming as is, unless it's like a nice home that you're using for like a primary residence or like a nice cabin or something like that. Most of the time it's like an as is. So sure, get an inspection just so you know what's wrong or maybe wrong with the house, but don't expect the deal to be held together by that contingency.
Sure. Just to know
at least
what
in
you're
our
getting
experience.
into, is all it is.
Yeah, it's kind of an as-is thing.
Our main contingencies were around review of the CRP contracts.
Correct.
And there's some other contracts that have been signed for like solar energy, or I'm sorry,
wind.
Mm-hmm. So,
which don't seem to hold. They're going to hold weight.
The likelihood
anyways.
of that happening is not good. But if they did, that would produce quite a bit more income, and they'd be in places that really don't limit us from. It's interesting how those contracts are worded. I sent you the language about like while they're being worked on, nobody can hunt. We're like, right,
get that.
Okay,
right.
I'm not hunting. I'm just gonna
go back here. I'm gonna be back here to sit with my bow for a while. Just don't worry about it. Yeah, it's crazy too because again, for us coming from Southwest PA to an area of Illinois, like. And it's anywhere, right? We've seen it in your area of Ohio, like, price per acre changes dramatically depending on where you're at, and it's because of tillable and populations and everything. But, it's crazy when you start to look at kind of the variation that you see from even when we left Pennsylvania to where we got out to Illinois in terms of these costs per acres. I mean, some places, people are paying, $10,000, $12,000 an acre easily, especially for tillable ground.
Mainly for tillable.
Yeah. There's other places that people are paying $7,000 an acre for recreational ground, and it's just what it is. And so, again, because of the investment side for us, it's trying to figure out, okay, if we were going to sell this thing in 3 or 5 years, like we have to be buying it for enough space that there's a margin there that we can actually sell it for to make money on the property. And that doesn't necessarily mean buying it for under market, but you got to walk a fine line of what is market value.
Yeah. Well, and I think the things as we're looking at this farm that really tipped us in that direction is like it's from a management standpoint, other than the CRP that's been put on it and the small amount of tillable acreage that's been worked, it's a completely blank slate. There's no food plots. There's no tree stands. There's no nothing.
Nothing.
It's old cattle farm. And it's just basically square one.
You
know, as far as turning this place around. We don't even have very few pictures. You know, there's a guy I think that was leasing it for a couple of years, and like he didn't tell anybody.
He didn't get much up, which is always a good sign in my opinion.
Yeah, and the landowner had some sheds that we thought were pretty impressive.
Yep.
So obviously, you know, some awesome potential there. But so, like you said, you know, I think we didn't get it for a steal by any means, but we got it for what I feel is slightly below market value. And with all that work that, you know, we plan on putting into the place and the deer that we plan on killing off of it, you know, I see a lot of, you know, room for potential growth there.
And I think that's the hard thing for people to imagine is that even if you don't plan on selling a piece of property, the fact is that whatever you buy it in and the improvements you make, there becomes a value that's assessed to that property that if you wanted to sell it, like, you know, it's worth X per acre.
Which we're not. We didn't go into this thing thinking, well, we're going to sell it. Like we don't know. We haven't even had those conversations.
We have no idea.
But regardless, we are going to invest into the property. We're going to add value. We're going to make it better for us or maybe somebody else someday.
Well, and if we want to buy other properties, that equity in this property is what you can begin to leverage to acquire, whether it's adjacent pieces or pieces in other areas as well. Yeah. So there's a lot of thought process into that. You know, I think it's funny. I go back to, I think Winky was the guy who said it best, is like, man, if you want to stop land prices from going up, you just got to get in the game, right?
Yeah.
That's the only time you're going to stop it is like, you buy it.
Feels good, dude. I mean, it was a couple of weeks ago, or it might even be on Bobby's podcast that'll drop tonight, we were talking about the roller rink and standing on the outside watching, and it's
waiting,
you know, jumping in that ring looks like on the truck hood, signing your name on there and saying, here you go, like put me in.
Yeah, and I mean, we so I guess break it down. You know, we looked at those first.
We looked at 3 properties.
The first
trip.
Yeah, all of which were pretty different from each other.
Yeah.
I would say, and we had, because of who they, like Bobby had one, some of our whitetail agents had another. Like we had some intel.
They were all very different. The first one, so Bobby's is a great piece. It will sell, you know.
It's set up to kill a giant.
It's 85 acres, and it's got a big, you know, big bottom. It's got some, you know, really good green to grain transitions that they've put on it. He harvested some timber off of it, you know, so there's some of that, but it's, you know.
Which transparently was why, for you and I, it didn't didn't check all of our boxes, because not that timber's a make or break for us, but that was an aspect of income that from an investment side, you and I saw as a possibility.
It was gone. Yeah, it had been taken off.
He already took it because it's an investment for him.
Yep.
That's
yeah, and it makes perfect sense that he would, that is his business, you know, and for somebody it's going to make a great fit, you know, but for us, we're, you know, we want that left on the bone, and we're willing to do the work.
We wanted a property maybe that was a little bit more raw.
Yes, definitely.
And that thing's ready to go. Like literally somebody could go on that thing in October and kill a giant.
Yeah, and they probably will. They probably will.
Yeah. It was a tough one to walk away. We talked about it a lot.
Well, we toiled over it for a bit.
That was probably the closest one, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I think the thing that like was tough for us too, and it definitely could be mitigated or something different could be done here, but a lot of that bottom is in canary grass, which we're not super familiar with. Like it's
very common. The more that we researched it, very common in a lot of the area. It's so funny because even our place, we go onto some of these layers. You turn on floodplain, dude. Most of these areas are in the floodplain.
A lot of this farm we're buying is in floodplain
because they're flat, low lying. Ag, very, very productive soils.
Yeah.
And so you see that canary grass come into a lot of those areas, I think, that are, you know, typically prone to flooding.
Yep. And so I think it was because, you know, we're, 6.5, 7 hours, you know, that canary grass takes management. Like you have to be on top of it, and we just weren't going to have the flexibility to be able to do it.
No, we weren't going to have that much time.
So, but regardless, it's in an awesome area. Some giants will probably come off.
And again, wasn't income producing, which is something that we were looking for overall.
Nutilla burr, CRP. So we went from there to one of Adam Crummer's, whitetail agent in Eastern Ohio, went to one of his listings. And it was like, it was a beautiful property. I mean, some awesome timber potential. Awesome cabin.
Pond.
You know, some really good deer that had come out of there. Really nice, secluded, like whatever, 10, 15 acre field. Like, just, there was a lot that could have been done with that. And I think we were just looking for more of a diverse property, I think, in the sense that, like, that one there, you could you could maximize that hidden field, do some things with the timber surrounding, and like it would be pretty easy to kill a 160 plus every year, I think. Like you just, here's where the blind is here, and I don't know.
It felt our style from like a timber standpoint, like big field, really nice hardwood timber. Needed a little bit of time before a cut, probably.
Yeah.
I think the biggest attraction, and we'll come back to it with our place, was that there was a really nice place to stay.
Yeah.
Almost too nice for us.
Yeah.
Just because of where our budget was.
Some giants in there too. I mean, they had some bucks they'd kill off the property in there.
We were glowing right through the windows. We're like, yep, that one would do.
There was like a 168 point in there, and
there were some giants.
Some giants for sure. What was it? We weren't feeling it. We're like, it's not.
I think the way that it's because again, we're looking at this for at least you and I to hunt, maybe the dads every once in a while.
Yeah.
So you gotta feel like you've got opportunity to spread out. It was
different points of access.
It was a smaller property, 70 some acres, and again, 71.
Yeah.
Because again, at that point, we were looking in that 80 acre range.
Mm-hmm. Funny how that works.
Yeah, and I think that. I think that because of how nice the cabin was freaking really awesome. Had these like side wings, like their own little bedrooms with lofts and stuff.
Yeah. Really gorgeous, like what you would expect in Illinois. Like it's a driveway back to a secluded cabin and a pond, like classic.
And like a perfect like oak flat and stuff.
Yeah.
That was too much money attributed to the overall property for us. We would rather have more property, less of a place to stay.
We weren't even set on so Bobby's place didn't even have there was no structures on it. So we were up in the air. Like I think my feeling towards it was, man, it'd be nice to have a place to stay, but it's going to be more expensive and like likely the property's not going to have it. And I can't believe we found a place that does.
Well, and I'll go back on it on ours of talking about why I like those structures beyond just the stay side. But what was the third place we looked at?
It felt like Southern Illinois. Yeah.
It was like an 80 acre block.
It was like an hour from Crumrins, and we're like, there was like an hour and a half till dark.
So
we're like,
funny,
let's rip down there and we'll just run around, and then the plan was just to kind of glass. Well, whatever. We're here.
And I don't mean this in a bad way. We just have a bit of a distaste for Southern Illinois.
Yeah.
And it's not anything to do with
experiential.
Yeah, it's nothing to do with the people or the hunting or anything like that. It just we had such a bad experience when we went down there
hunting the Shawnee.
Yeah, and just cypress swamps. Like we felt like we were more in like Arkansas than we were Illinois.
Yeah.
And I think it's because, and I'm sure a lot of people listening to this have that mindset of like Illinois, like, beautiful farmland, like, rolling hills type thing, which is eventually where we bought. It's flat, a lot of water, a lot of flooding, you could tell, and just a block.
Yeah. If I never see another cypress tree in my life, I'll be okay.
And so even though that had a lot of timber, like there was nothing really of value on it. It was the cheapest farm that we looked at. Like it was one of those farms we talked about, and it's like, well, Jeremy, why would you even look at it? Well, it's because I think it was like $288 or something
price.
for 80 acres.
Yeah, we're like, we got to at least go look.
We could literally go in with
had some tillable at the front.
Yeah, we could go in there with two bulldozers and clear 2 big food plots, and like. There you go.
Yep. Probably could kill some big deer.
We saw a lot of deer. We saw a lot of deer around.
Pile of them. That was also one that. It's funny how that timing works. It's just like we're driving down the road and we're like, well, here's the property. We're passing on our left here, and there's this kid on a 4-wheeler behind us, and
he was in front of us at first.
In front of. Well, whatever. At some point, we notice he's gone, and as we're driving back around, we see there's a 4-wheeler, like a trail that cuts right into the property.
Yeah.
And we're like. He had to have gone in there. Like, there's nowhere else for him to go. So we drove on past and ended up parking down there.
And then we look back and he comes out of there.
And I waved him down. I said, hey, come over here. I said, did you just come out of this property? And he's like, thought he was in trouble.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know that. So, but he's like, yeah. He's
saves us a lot of heartache.
Yeah. He's the guy was just, I don't know what he was doing in there. Just turning around is basically what he said. But, sounds like, I asked him, I was like, you guys hunt this? And I don't remember what he said, but it sounded like a yes to me. Like, so they've been hunting.
What you say is like his grandpap or somebody owned it.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody owned it at one point or had it, a family member.
Maybe.
There was a cool, you're
right. Because they own the adjacent one. He had that blind there.
Yeah, and there was a cool, national refuge or state land that you couldn't hunt. Like,
Yeah,
just
pretty
block
close.
there.
And he showed us right away some bucks that he'd killed, and like good bucks.
Yeah, a couple
but
good
like,
bucks.
You know,
Yeah, he was more concerned that we were gonna kick him off from frog gigging.
I know.
And we're like, yeah, dude, I
It's the Southern Illinois vibe, and we're like, just not feeling it. You really weren't feeling it.
No. The only thing I was feeling is I got to pick some blackberries on the way in through the CRP.
Yeah.
Because it did have some income producing.
A little bit.
But like, so
we just that blocky Southern Illinois feel is just we don't like it as much.
Well, frankly, I'm a sucker for those properties, like because it is.
You're like, look at this timber surrounded by big ag. It's got to be good.
Well, that and it because it's priced so low. I'm only thinking, well, dude, I can make this so much better and make a profit on it.
Yeah.
You know?
And that difference.
There's a lot of room
that difference
there.
is realized. Like even, even just an hour south, it's like all of a sudden those values plummet, and I think it has a lot to do with the soil fertility and also the quality of deer that come out of those areas. I mean, it is a reality that like those big deer areas, the price gets realized, I think,
Yeah. I mean, we were talking to our agent, he was saying that in some of like the traditional Pike counties, Adams counties, he's seeing rec values up towards $7 an acre.
Wow.
$7,000 an acre for rec ground. Now I'm sure it's got some tillable or CRP or something on it, but like,
well, Southern Ohio or Southern, Iowa stuff is going for like $5,500 for rec ground and stuff, and it's like non-residents it doesn't even make sense for them to buy it. That's just like residents. And
well, I mean, even where you look, like I'm in the low end of Ohio, like my stuff's getting into that 35 to 4. But if you go in the central part between you and I mean, it's every bit of 8 to 9 there.
Wow.
Like in that Muskegum, Licking, even Ben's area.
Is it
Shockton.
really?
Yeah.
8 or 9 for rec ground.
Wow. It's like 15 plus for tillable.
Wow. Yeah. Well, and that's different from where I'm at in Ohio. Like
You're 5,500.
I'm central
probably?
but east. Yeah. That was literally the piece that I'm referencing was as tillable as it gets. It was just we've talked about it. Like our cash rent stuff only goes for $75 an acre, so it's not like great ground by any means. But that went for $5,500 an acre at auction.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, there's a lot of auction that happens right in that area.
So that production thing is interesting because you mentioned that, and not to like tote, but like in the area that we bought, most of that tillable's north of $300 an acre for cash rent, which is like crazy.
Well, it's big ag country. Like where we ended up buying, it's like it's ag as far as the eye can see.
Yep. Yeah, I mean,
which I feel so comfortable in.
It's gonna take me time to get used to.
You'll get it quick
because we, being an ag country, we are the cover property.
Yeah.
Not saying that there aren't other properties around us that have cover, but like our property is cover.
Yeah.
Very very little food as of right now from a conventional crop side.
None. Well, there's a small hayfield.
Small hayfield and like what, a 6-acre bean field or something? 7-acre bean field.
Yep.
So, it's interesting how it works out because we left Illinois the first time talking hard about probably Bobby's place the most.
Yeah.
And ultimately just, it was too done to our liking. We wanted more of a raw property. We wanted more of a chance to, see some unrealized value.
It's funny, that dynamic, like, so Jeremy and I we bought this property together. So, and all these we're looking at, and it's funny how our dynamic is like, we've never walked a property that we were considering buying before. Mm-mm. And it was exactly like what I expected, like, you're an eternal optimist in a good way. And I am too, but like, because I know that about you, I have to be the one that points out these issues or potential issues. Yeah. And somehow we land like right in the middle. And I felt like our consensus on that place was very, very much in line. It took us a day probably to figure out, like, I don't think this one's right for us.
Well, there was a point where you and I were standing down in the bottom and probably a big buck bed that we were like, there's going to be a giant down here this fall. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure there will be.
Sure there will be.
It was really nothing about the property and the hunting that we didn't buy it for. It was because from an investment side, we needed income producing. Really, for you and I to make it work.
It was the timber and it was the canary grass. Yep. Those were the two main things that were like, I don't know. It's just for us, I don't know.
Yep. So we leave and we're driving home and, I don't know. we're still in good spirits. It's his first time out. We got to go in Illinois.
My heart, I wasn't like
yeah.
dead set on getting anything. You can't be. You can't be like, I have to buy a property on this trip. Like, because then you'll force it. And we were totally fine with going home empty-handed, basically.
So on the way home, we get a message from Rising, right?
Yeah.
And so he connects us with a guy about a property that was off market. Yeah. We're talking to this guy. And meanwhile, if we had known this, 5 hours before, we probably would have been like, turned around.
What the heck,
and
Ben?
went.
Like, why didn't you tell us this a week ago?
Yeah. And so we basically have to say, listen, man, like, sounds great. Like, sounds like this could be one for us. Well, Jared and I have to talk about it anyways, because it's way bigger than we thought we were going to get into. Mm-hmm. But, let us talk and we'll let you know. Because we have to go home at this point. We were already like
halfway home.
Yeah, halfway home.
Passed right through that corridor where you were close on a 200 in Columbus.
In Columbus area.
Real close.
Yeah. Yeah. Close to the Creek King guys, probably.
Yeah.
And so we get home, and I don't think we stirred on it long. He sent us pins or something, and it was like,
well, we both got it.
Yeah.
Like, they'd sent some pictures and stuff.
No, he sent pins. He sent pins of the property first.
We're like, that looks like it.
That looks like it could be it. Yeah. It all came down to like we knew nothing about the area, so we didn't know anything about what kind of deer we could expect. We didn't know anything about like, is that a good price?
Which is the thing. I mean, until we started this like Illinois land pursuit, like I and still don't really, but like have a full grasp on this concept of like pockets of big deer. Cause it's like, the more we talk to them guys like in Illinois, and I'm sure, anybody that's from or spends time like in a big buck state, it's kind of known. It's like, oh, well down here, this is really good. And over here, it's like, yeah, it's good, but not, it's funny how we got into some of that. Cause like, even as we were walking this one that we're under contract for, we asked the realtor that we're with, we're like, hey, we're pretty sold on this place, but
you have some other ones.
We saw you have this other one listed down here. It also looks good. Like, what do you think? Knowing our intentions and kind of where we're coming from on this place, he's like, I probably am not doing my job by selling you my listing. He's like, but you want to be on this one.
This is the one.
This is the one.
Yeah, if you have to pick one or the other, like 10 times over.
And they weren't far from each other.
It's in the right spot. No, we were an hour from each other.
An hour from it, So it's funny how there's just like good pockets, and not that the outside of that is bad necessarily, but there seems to be some really good areas, and if you can figure them out, talk to guys, and and then I'm sure they come and go too. I've actually, we haven't talked about it yet, but somebody from that area told me that they went through a bout of CBD not CWD, but EHD a couple of years ago, and he's like, it's just now like
rebounding,
coming back around. It's getting good.
The HUNTR Podcast is brought to you by Hoyt Archery.
Dude, where would we be without our Hoyt bows?
Probably shooting crossbows.
or a Matthews, yeah.
One and the same.
Yeah.
But in all seriousness, we love being Hoyt guys because you stand out. When you're in this room full of other people that shoot these other types of bows, I feel like the Hoyt guys just stick out.
Dude, it's just a legit bow. I mean, especially that carbon riser, man. I mean, I know that they've got several other aluminum lines as well, but for me, I'm shooting that RX5 in the carbon model. They've since come out with the RX7, and I can't tell you how much I love being a Hoyt guy amongst a sea full of Matthews guys. So we're out there, I think, proving them wrong, shooting 80 pounds and, killing stuff.
Hey, man, if you want to get serious, get Hoyt. Yeah, which frankly, it is what it is. I mean, you can't control it. I've got fears of it this year a little bit out there, not where we're at, but they've been pretty dry out there.
Yeah. The whole Midwest has been dry.
And so
I sent you that. Did you watch that video of Bill? He's like, yeah, all my food plots failed, basically.
What the hell, man? That's crazy.
They're in a drought. Like, they just don't get much rain.
Yeah, still, I don't know about that. He needs deer grow.
Bad seed or something.
Needs some deer grow. But yeah, so I've got concerns of that because, I mean, when they do get rain, you're going to have mud flats forming because everything then gets dry.
Well, fortunately, and I don't know that this will be like a saving grace for us necessarily, but it's got a creek running through it.
Yep, pretty substantial one.
And so I think that supplies water to the property almost year round. I think it's almost always running. We were out there, a couple weeks ago, and I guess we did get a rain recently.
Yeah, what'd they say? They got like 4 inches or something?
Oh, did they?
Yeah, remember they said they got a lot because we were we were like, holy shit, like we can't cross this. We're going to build a bridge.
You're saying 4 inches is a lot?
Yes. Isn't that the average?
Yeah.
No?
Slightly less.
Oh, okay. But yeah, no. So they
had gone.
We were looking at that and saying, well, man.
And it was ripping because we went to look at it like, can we get across it thing? And it's like,
No.
not today.
And then he's like, well, yeah, most of summer and fall, you'll just like walk right through it. It's not deep at all.
Okay.
So yeah, it'll be interesting. Obviously, that's a concern for everybody. There's nothing you can do about it. You know, it just happens on a seasonal basis. And
yeah. Well, frankly, from like an investment in this property, the question has come up. We're like, well, dude, one of the biggest reasons that the property, you know, is or in the future will be so valuable is because of like the big deer
quality of deer
that are on it, that are in the area, you know. And it's like you have to ask yourself when you're buying a property like that, dude, what happens if the deer don't exist anymore? What happens if something wipes them out? What happens, like disease or whatever, regulation or something?
Yeah.
So I don't know. And it's part of the risk that we're taking on. So it's like, what are you going to do? Not buy a property because a disease could wipe deer out? Like,
well, we talked about that with people. I mean, I don't, as detrimental and like severe as it is in a concentrated time period as EHD is, like CWD obviously I think poses more of a long-term threat.
Yeah.
But if you look at, you know, places like Buffalo County, Wisconsin, like, is it having an effect on property values? Because they found it up there, right? It's in a disease management
seemingly
zone.
not.
Doesn't
right?
seem like it.
And why do you think that is?
There's nothing you can do about it. You know, are you going to just stop hunting Buffalo County, Wisconsin because they found CWD? No.
Well, not because they found CWD, but if it seemed like that was translating to like less quality deer.
So that would be. I just don't think we've seen it yet.
Mm-hmm.
Ask me 3 years from now, I bet we have a different tune there. Yeah. And that sucks for anybody that's listening that hunts that, you know, Buffalo County, Tremolo, or there's several of them up there. Yeah, I mean,
we don't know, right? Like,
well,
the CWD thing is funny because like I never realized till we started talking about like how controversial it was. So like, people don't think it exists at all. Like
it exists. I mean, we're not going to argue that it exists. The problem
is there anywhere though, Jeremy, that like is there anywhere that you can point to and say CWD has had a drastic effect on this area? Like the deer quality's less.
Yes.
Where?
It would have been northern Missouri would have been the place to do it, but it's not because CWD killed the deer as much as the measures to correct, restrain, you know, limit CWD caused the effect. So Missouri Department of Conservation got a lot of shit for this, but when CWD was discovered in that northeastern part of Missouri, they did massive harvest of deer, department, like sharpshooter type stuff on all lands up there, and knocked the population like way back, substantially. I mean, I don't remember the number of deer that they harvested. Somebody will, I'm sure, comment right now on that, but it was substantial. I think this was prior to Emily working there. And then
when was this roughly?
She worked there in 2012. So I want to say it was probably that 2009, 10, 11 timeframe. Maybe into 12, I'm not sure. Anyways, so they go in and they harvest all these deer, and I mean, complete reductions in some cases. And so what happened was a lot of the leasing, a lot of the property values from a rec standpoint decreased. There's no deer.
Sure.
Like it wasn't just that the quality of deer decreased, but they also removed the antler restrictions off of that. So, you know, you should do a spike if you want.
So I'm not asking you to like make a political stance on this, but like what do you think would have happened if they hadn't done that?
I mean, it's the speculative because nobody's let it go to the point except for like where you see it out west is that, you know, deer don't necessarily die from chronic wasting disease. They die from effects of chronic wasting disease, or in the case of Missouri, in that situation,
the preventative
measures.
Sure.
So what you end up seeing from a chronic wasting disease side is like, you know, you'll see these rare pictures of these deer like all shriveled up and dying. Like very rarely, you know, if that was happening a lot, you'd be walking across deer in a lot of places.
I mean, I can understand why guys would be like, does it really exist? Because it's like you don't really ever see that.
So what it does though affect is it affects the brain and the nervous system to where deer lose fear of humans, fear of vehicles. So a lot of times, you know, Florida
I've seen some of that.
Florida, just in case, they just found a roadkill chronic wasting disease deer.
Mm-hmm.
So they've been testing hunter harvested deer, haven't found any. Find one in a roadkill. Likely, there's a chance that deer was messed up in the head and got hit.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows? Because if you think about the number of roadkill deer, there's not many of those. There's some states that are testing a lot of those, but most of them, are not getting tested.
Sure.
And then there's other diseases, pneumonia, things like that, when their body just starts to fall apart. So yeah, I mean, if somebody says,
so Buffalo County, I guess would be the one, right? Would that be the most notable? Like, hey, they found the most cases.
No, it's actually pretty light up there right now. There's other cases. I think like Richland County and Wisconsin. There's some places in Wisconsin that have like what they would call 40+% prevalence rates, meaning 40+% of the bucks that they're testing have CWD.
Oh, wow.
Now, does that mean that they look like they're dying? No, by no means. Is it science-based that eventually that disease will kill them? Yes.
What are like how does the life expectancy change on a deer that has CWD? Is it like, well, it will kill it, but it's like in a greater than their lifetime anyway, so it's like it doesn't matter? Yeah,
I mean, it definitely is a years, not months. Like when we talk about EHD, we're talking like days or weeks for death. We're talking fast. Yeah, we're talking months or years in CWD. And I think, don't quote, I don't know, I'm sure the research is out there. I think I saw somewhere that it's most likely going to die from some sort of other act before chronic wasting disease takes place.
And like that leaves the door so wide open for questioning, like, you and I both have Lyme disease, right? And it's like, well, yeah, it might kill us at some point, but like,
it might.
I'm probably going to die of something else first.
Yeah. Well, and I think and that's where it's hard for the other people to, like the other side of this CWD argument, to realize, because the fact is let's just play, the hypothetical, say, well, let's not do anything. Mm-hmm. If it's going to outlast the deer, a deer lifetime, just not do anything.
Sure.
If it gets out of control, right? If all of a sudden this thing does start to spread to where 100% of deer are affected, the two arguments are, number one, it'll be so wild that we can't control it. There are no preventative measures anymore because every deer has it.
Which there aren't now. All we can do is keep it from spreading by knocking the deer herd back.
Correct.
Like there is no cure.
And removal of other preventative measures, like this is where we see baiting bans in a lot of the CWD areas. Things that prevent deer from congregating.
Yeah. Which, and to the guys that commented,
bans.
like, hey, it doesn't, like, we totally get it. There's other ways to spread it, like licking
branches, whatever.
Mineral.
Yeah.
Deer just being
It's just
deer.
preventative measures on that. In fact, Illinois, I mean, no mineral, no bait, no nothing. Like it's
nothing. And I think it's always been that way.
At least in CWD's been in there in the state. So yeah, I mean, it's something that I think a lot of people have a tough time grasping, because with EHD, it's like deer gets it, and in a lot of the Midwest and Northeast, deer's dead, right? In the South, those deer get chronic forms of EHD. They just look like shit, but they mostly make it through. Mm-hmm. So where CWD, you kill this deer. My buddy killed one, Eric Mitchell, who we had on. Mm-hmm. He killed probably a 3.5-year-old or so in Richland County, Wisconsin. Looked like a giant normal buck and from the rut, and just tested positive for CWD. And so I think the big thing, and we talked about this with Ranella a while back, of like, man, I don't fear antis and anybody like screwing with hunting anymore, right? I just don't fear that, except if it would go to the point of a threat to the human population. If CWD became 100% prevalent in all deer, and somehow whoever, CDC or pick your poison, decides that there's a chance that could jump to humans in the form of Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, which is like the mad cow disease that they had in England and stuff. Same type of thing. Now hunting's threatened.
Yeah.
Because whitetail deer pose a threat to everyone. So there is a balance there. Do I blame people getting pissed off that, a DNR or Department of Wildlife is put? No, I get it, man.
Yeah.
Like you're vested. I mean, what's interesting though, for what it's worth, is like, I mean, when I lived in, because I lived in Missouri during the time that was all happening in Northeast, those counties were barren, man. Like Macon County, Lynn County. I mean, they were barren from people hunting. They're just like, there's no fucking deer there. They're dead. They killed them all. Those counties, I think, are now producing some of the better quality whitetails in the state because they've reintroduced to where these deer have so many more resources. The deer that are living and getting to mature age have so many more resources, so much space that they're higher quality.
Have they done like CWD testing since? So like if they're
always doing it. Yep.
Okay, so has it helped the percentage?
I don't know what the prevalent rates are now. I mean, the disease is still spreading in the state to other counties. Now, is that because of deer movement? No, it's because humans moving deer parts, in my opinion. So like you shoot a deer in this county, you take it back home, you dump the carcass out back, it had CWD because you don't know it. Like if you looked at it, it looks like a normal deer. Right. I mean, that's the problem is that not even as a biologist can I look at a deer and say that deer has CWD. Right. Most of these deer look healthy. That is
the main thing. Like that's people, like if we shot a deer in Kansas, and I know it's illegal, so this is why we do this, but let's say we just brought the whole head home.
Yep.
With the brain intact and everything. Then when we got home, we caped it out, and I just like chucked the brain along with whatever else.
Into the woods.
Yeah, into a ditch beside the house or something. How does that get picked up? Like it
decomposes into the soil.
Yeah.
And then what it's shown in the research in these areas in Colorado where they first did this research back in the 60s is that the plants and stuff
will uptake it. And then whatever eats it
passes.
Will pass.
So think of anywhere a deer dies in the woods from potentially, or it has chronic wasting, you shoot it, it goes off, it dies, you can't find it. That entire area now becomes a contamination zone to pass that to other animals. That's why the prevalence rate in a lot of these places is increasing, is because unless you are knocking back the deer herd, right? I mean, it doesn't just have to be the deer dies of CWD. Somebody gut bombs one with an arrow, right? It runs off and dies in the middle of the woods. It decomposes. That entire area now becomes a site contamination area. Any deer that eats or feeds in that is exposed to the disease. That's
crazy. That's wild. And it's just in like the spinal stuff, right? Like the brain and the
fluids, spinal tissues. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's so weird.
And I mean, so that's where like...
Did they ever fix mad cow disease? Did they...
I don't know.
Like, is that a genetic thing?
I think it's still... I mean, Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease.
Like, you don't hear about it anymore. You hear about...
I mean, what is it? CJD? I mean, it's still a real disease. People get it. Yeah, I mean, it's still a real thing. But yeah, it's... And the hard part of that is then you look at the EHD, which you and I both experienced firsthand. I mean, we found deer...
A little bit.
When I lived in Missouri in 2012, we got hammered. And I can remember opening day of bow season, September 15th or whatever, sitting in my tree stand on public land, and I was like, I could smell death in the air. And it was like, what the hell, man? And I didn't see any deer. I get down, I go to the creek. 2 of the bucks I was hunting were dead there in the creek. Wow. And I ended up finding like 14 deer total. And I mean, so it is isolated, but when it hits hard, which is why so many people are like, we need to fix EHD. Listen, it's then the same thing. You're talking about a biting midge that lives in a mud flat that has cyclic hatches like a locust or cicada or whatever else, that feeds on the blood meal of a deer that then feeds on another deer and passes it. You can't control it. Can't spray for it. You're not gonna put mineral out that's gonna fix it. Like there is no fix to it.
Yeah.
We tried.
Some guy, I know like Lukoski and a lot of guys are feeding like some of the analogic stuff that they think helps.
It's not. I mean, I don't know. It's not gonna fix it.
With EHD specific, I don't know what it is.
The hardest part about EHD, because we did this in Mississippi, we actually sprayed an ultra low volumes fogger with an insecticide in the pens, trying to kill all of the... I didn't give a shit what was flying. Kill it all. And our deer still got EHD in the pens. You can't... Like, as soon as you kill some, new ones come in. The biggest thing that I think people have a hard time fathoming is that in the South, this happens like every year, right? And so these deer become... They build up a bit of an immunity to it, right? In a lot of cases... When a doe has a fawn, she'll pass that antibody down into the fawn.
Yeah.
We don't have that in the Midwest and Northeast because it's not common here. We haven't had EHD for but 20 years maybe.
Yeah.
Or less.
Yeah. It kind of, begs the question of like on any of this disease stuff you talk about, like, well, there's natural cycles in anything, it's just like a forest fire. People look at it and say, oh, it's terrible. It's detrimental. But then you look at it shortly after.
History
it's like,
repeats itself every whatever year.
So, I mean, it almost, and I'm not obviously a biologist or anything or a doctor, but it seems like, maybe some of those disease oriented things are just, it has to happen. Like it's part of the progression. It's like maybe, you see some of those areas where
Density,
they bounce back. Yeah. And that's kind of what I was asking is like maybe they haven't had the opportunity to go all the way through a CWD cycle. We killed them all first. So it's hard to know like what.
Yeah. And I mean, again, I'm sure there's assumptions built in. There's factual, research around it, but, and you got to kind of rely on the experts. But, they're essentially saying if you let it go unchecked, it could wipe out deer. So who's willing to take that risk? Yeah. Not me. Like if you tell me that you need to knock back my deer population for the next 2 years just to make sure that I have deer in year 3 versus maybe having no deer in year 3, yeah, go for it.
Yeah.
I mean, does it suck? Yeah. It is not a good thing, but, and you can question it. You could say, you know what? That's bullshit. I don't believe it. Do you want to be responsible for the elimination of white-tailed deer? I sure as fuck wouldn't. I'd feel pretty shitty if I was the one who said, this is bullshit, it doesn't exist, and then 2 years from now, there are no more deer.
Yeah.
But
I don't know. I get it. I just see what you're saying. It's just like there's a lot of like crossovers with like the COVID stuff.
100%.
How that was all handled.
I completely get it.
Look at where we're at with that at the end of the day. It's like, oh, you probably would have been fine.
I completely agree, man. Yeah, it's a hard pill to swallow.
Honestly, dude, that's the worst thing that came out of COVID is because of how that was handled. Like I think
we already didn't trust the government.
Myself and people now just have a distrust for things like trust of science and scientific, just like the governing bodies on these things. It's like, well, you screwed that one up pretty good. Like,
yeah.
Which is not a good thing, I don't think.
No, and I mean
moving forward because science obviously is
it's gonna it'll come back to bite us because at some point something shitty is going to happen and we're gonna say I don't believe you. It's like the what was it, the person who cried wolf, the little boy who cried wolf.
Mm-hmm.
How many times are you gonna say it before I'm like I don't believe you, and then it's gonna bite you in the ass because it actually will be true that time.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of the same. The one thing on the CWD side, I will say there are absolutely politics involved with it. So don't get me wrong when I say that.
Everything's politics.
But there are a lot of good biologists and universities involved with it who have nothing to gain from, saying that CWD could wipe out the deer.
Yeah.
Frankly, if I'm the hunting industry, right, I would sure as shit be erring on the side of caution. I wouldn't be calling it bullshit.
I mean, dude, look, it's so hard to get people to make decisions for the future.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, that's the selfish, and that's why I said, do you want to be the one responsible for letting the white-tailed deer go extinct? It's easy for somebody to say, well, yeah, I'll take that blame. When it happens, you don't care. Yeah. You're just like, okay, on to the next thing. To guys like you and I mean, deer mean a lot to us in our lives. If there are no deer anymore, I don't know what the hell I do. Sure shit, I'm not going to start hunting turkeys because I hate them.
Yeah, I'd have to hunt something else.
But I mean, that's the risk that's kind of taken in that situation.
Look at my grass starting to turn yellow.
Mm-hmm. You sprayed that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Moving on from the CW thing.
Yeah, it's a hard it's relevant into this one because
well, that's what we asked. Like we're like, hey, we're making a big investment into a piece of property here. A large portion of its value is attributed to the deer in the area. What happens?
Which I don't think is necessarily the same with our other properties we own. Your family farm, my Ohio farm.
No, they're not.
They're not. My Southern Ohio a little bit is tied to that deer side of things, but it's low cost. It's not like I'm paying premium dollar per acre down there.
Right.
But this one is, and given there is an unknown value because we're not farmers, like that ground is freaking super valuable out there from a tillable standpoint.
There's always an unknown value, dude. I mean, even like where I'm at in Ohio, it's like years ago, people would have never guessed that oil and gas could be a thing. Like today's age, people would have never guessed that like solar energy would be paying
crazy
like what it is. And it's like, there's so many unknown, potentials for land that's like, I don't know. Some you'll never see coming, but other ones like this one here, you and I can look at and see like huge potential for a lot of different areas. Between the tillable, the way the cash rent is currently set up, between what we can add to it from a hunting standpoint to like the structures that exist there currently. It's like just a world of opportunity there.
So one thing to talk about on that, we discussed that we have there's about 56 acres of CRP on this ground. This piece of property.
And 2 contracts.
And 2 different contracts, of which one's got 2 years, one's got 4 years left on it, 10-year contracts. Obviously, from a hunting standpoint and bedding and everything, like it seems the smartest because we can turn, let me back up, we can turn 10% of that CRP field into food plots if we want. So if it's a 30-acre field, which we have one, we could potentially put 3 acres of that into food plots and still be in balance or check with the CRP contract.
Yep.
That said, one has 2 years, one has 4 years. If for some reason we decided to sell, it would seem smarter from our side to put that back into tillable, being that tillable ground's worth more. We kind of had this like brainstorming discussion
from a selling standpoint.
From a selling standpoint.
It almost seems while you own it, at least in this case, the reason the guy put it in is because CRP was paying more than cash rent.
And he doesn't have to deal with a farmer.
As I asked him, I said, "Why'd you put it in a CRP?" He's like, "Money."
Yeah, money. Good answer. Good answer.
So it seems like while you own it, it's most valuable as CRP, but to sell it. And it probably has
Although
to do...
we've learned some new stuff about this tillable thing, that common grounds thing that Bobby was talking about. Our agent talked to us about that too. Yeah. I mean, it seems like that from an auction standpoint is real, and it's limited to the area it's relevant. Illinois it is, Iowa it is. But I mean, that is absolutely recognizing the value of cash rent.
Yeah. Well, and that's, the only reason it's worth it is if it's paying more, or if you desperately need cover, like, because it definitely does provide that. So, but when you go to sell it, and I think it probably has a lot to do with the length of the term of the contract. Is like, farming is typically year to year. Maybe you've got some 3-year deals to start off type of deal, but you see the tillable ground sell for a lot more than you do the CRP ground in for the most part.
Yeah.
So we don't know what we're gonna do with it, right? We've got a lot of projects ahead of us to
we have no idea what to
start.
I mean, we have some history of like knowing that there are deer around, but like not real recent. Besides like at least in seeing the pictures. Yeah. So and this thing is raw. I mean, like you said, there's no food plots on it. There's no stands on it. It's thick. It's nasty, which I like. It's kind of funny because I would say Bobby's was this way, which is our style, and anyone listening to this knows what they're looking for. Like they're not aesthetically pleasing. Like if you just think of like, oh, I want this like great farm. Like if you looked at it, you'd be like, ugh.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I mean, yeah, it seems like it's the right one, but like it just doesn't look great because it's not manicured.
Yeah, at all.
And Bobby Shelby was like that, which is why we liked it. Is like it is raw.
They look rough. They look like old cattle pasture and
untouched. Just neglected to a point. Yeah. And I mean, but that's what these big deer want, man. They just want to be left alone.
That's the most important thing to a big mature buck, is an area that's neglected.
It just wants to be left alone.
Yep.
Doesn't mean like you can't have a cornfield on it and soybeon field or food plots and stuff.
It almost felt wrong too, because like we walked the farm, like a better part of it, you know, and it felt like we shouldn't be walking.
How long did it take us to walk that farm, you think? Just so people understand how much time we spent before we were like, and given we studied maps very.
Oh yeah, we knew what
our realtor was like. You guys know.
I was like, why don't we go up here around we call this the Cove here. He's like, yeah, you just want to drive, like, yeah, we know where we're going.
We studied the maps.
We probably spent
4 hours.
No, probably 2 or 3.
Yeah. So just for people like, because obviously
we had a machine to get around. Which
we overanalyze stuff. I mean, we walked through. We knew where we were going, which I would say that's a big thing. If you're going to look at a farm, first of all, try to get as much intel, maps, etc. Study as much as you can before you get, feet on the ground.
You should pretty much know, like, before you get to the property, and then being there should just really confirm.
Yep, it's a confirmation of like, yep, this is what we thought it was.
And for us, it was like we had that feeling. We're like, I think this is it. And depending on the price and
timber was one that we were looking at. There was an unknown timber factor.
The state of the house was probably the biggest unknown.
Huge.
We're like, what are we getting into? And we were pleasantly surprised. Yeah, and I think after that, I was like, dude, this looks
it's gravy
pretty
on
good.
top now. If everything else checks out like we think it's going to check out, it'll be good.
Yeah, I mean, because we had concerns about like the roof, like ours probably is our main thing is we're like
roof
this thing is going to need a
foundation.
roof right away and this and that, and like so we got up in that crawl space and we looked and there's no leaking. It looks good. It's old. It'll need replaced at some point.
Yeah, but I mean from
structurally sound.
Yeah, for everyone listening, like, it's a huge investment for us. The last thing we want to do is pull $20,000 out for a new roof. Like we couldn't do it.
Well, yeah, immediately we're looking at, okay, how much timber can we pull off and put into this thing and other areas of income. So like because of that CRP program, we'll get a check like pretty soon after closing, which is nice. That'll go right back into it. So
right back into it.
Immediately we're looking at how to cash flow the thing.
Which is kind of
at the same time, we're like, well, immediately I want to put tree stands and food plots on it, and all that stuff costs money, So we're actively going through those decisions right now. We're going to be back out there in 2 weeks.
Yeah, we'll be back in 2 weeks. So this is a good point, because I know people think like, oh, these guys don't fucking work.
Which I can't wait to get back. And to that point, that's all I do is work.
Yeah. So we actually asked our agent for some contacts for food plots out there. Obviously, Jared and I do all of our own food plots, probably spend way too much time. Like literally, I feel like I just finished my summer plots and I'm already behind on my fall plots. Yep. So because of where this is and equipment and stuff, we're like, dude, we've got timing. We got things to do. If we say, hey, we got to go back out there and then go back out there, our wives are going to divorce us and we'll only own half the farm. So we asked for a recommendation on a food plot company to try to get some things established especially because this place is very raw. Jared and I are kind of the type like, dude, we'll put backpack sprayers on. We'll go nuke some stuff. We'll seed some brassica in and we'll be, hey, we're in good shape. There's a risk in that because if it doesn't work well, we can't just jump back out and try to do it again. Mm-hmm. So even though we normally would not do it, and frankly, because of what we're doing on the purchase, like it's title money, we're considering a food plot company to go in there and plant the plots, or at least some of the plots, because we just need to get them established to make sure that we have an opportunity this fall.
And when you say food plot company, it sounds like really legit. It's basically
it's
like a kid with some buddies that run a landscaping company, and like he's done some work for guys. So they know their way around a tractor basically, and they've got chainsaws and they can put seed down and fertilizer.
That's it.
It's pretty low key. Like it's just,
and it feels weird doing it because we are. I mean, per what we're talking about with this property is like we want raw, like we want to be able to develop this, but sometimes you got to call in help when it makes sense.
Yeah, well, and our time is limited, so like even when we get to go back out at a maximum, it'll be for 2 days coming up here, and it's
stands, cameras,
mid-July now, so it's like, hey, we need.
Yeah, if you're listening to this, hopefully our food plots are in.
Well, and so we'll share maybe we won't, but we've got the plan laid out basically.
Just kidding.
Like we've got like 2 destination plots kind of planned out, totaling about 7 acres.
Yep.
And we're late for grain this year, so we're like maybe cereal grain for this year, maybe a late bean planting.
Maybe.
In addition, we've got 3 acres of brassicas in 2 different plots and 1 acre of clover across 3 different plots is what we're thinking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's a lot of work to do in literally 2 days. So no time to go out ahead and spray or cut.
We're 8+ hours away from it.
Pick up fertilizer. You got to drive out there. And we have to hang and trim out all of our stands and get cameras hung. If we want to hunt this place this year. So that's where we kind of elected. We're like, hey, it probably does make sense to have somebody come in and help us with cost dependent. We're still waiting on, like, he's going to give us a quote type of deal, but he'll be able to go in and help us kind of establish those things, at least for the first year. It really is that thatch that we're concerned about.
Because it was in CRP.
Even if I just go and spread seed, like, is it going to get enough seed to soil contact? Then we don't know. So hopefully that works out and we can spend our 2 days overseeing that and making, adding to it if need be, but then also putting in our stands. We have to buy stands out there because we're flying out. I'll bring
our cameras and our batteries and stuff.
And so we got a lot of work to do.
And again, the word is investment, and I'm not abusing it there, but like if we pay for somebody to put these plots in, it'll make it much more manageable for us to do it ourselves next year because, you'll have an established plot. And I mean, the last thing we want is to have spent all this money and all this anticipation and us to do the food plot shitty and fail. And then it's like, it's not nearly as good as it could have been this fall. So, there's a point of doing it right.
It's really a timing thing. Like, if we had the equipment, like, if we had a chainsaw and a 4-wheeler and a sprayer out there, like, it'd be no question. Like, we're going to do it.
Sure.
I've never paid anybody to do our food plots before.
I mean, we have all the equipment. We have everything we need. We've got tractors, we've got sprayers, we've got chainsaw, we've got everything
here.
Yeah,
yeah. We don't have anything out there. Nothing. Nada.
We were talking.
We're even talking like, do we drive out? Do we
buy backpack sprayers, buy Glide, buy
fertilizer,
seed,
spreaders, bag seeder, chainsaw?
And I mean, we could store.
We're going to. Oh, we're going to. But just can we do it in a week and a half before we go back out? I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's too. I mean, they're just not going to be as efficient as they could be, and that's just where it is. So keep in mind you're listening to this probably in 1st of August or whatever. This is the 13th of July. We just went under contract last week. So, from a timing standpoint to get fall plots in, it's tight. But
we can talk to you a little bit on because this is a really big tool that somebody can use, I guess. As I was talking to my parents about like what we're looking to do here, I found out my grandfather did this a lot as he was buying farms. And so this guy that lives there now, like as we kind of were getting to know him and going through like the negotiating process, like it became abundantly clear to us that like he didn't want to leave.
He didn't want to go anywhere.
He didn't want to sell to begin with.
It's been his childhood home. He's lived there his entire life.
He's comfortable there. He doesn't want to like go into a home, and which I
don't
totally understand.
No, I don't blame him.
And so what Jeremy and I ended up doing is it's not quite a life estate. Like, there is a time frame on it, but basically we started with like 6 months and ended negotiations with like 2 years. We gave him 2 years to live in the house.
Yeah. And whether he said he's actively looking for a place that's more convenient because he can't maintain the farm. He's not doing anything with that. His health won't let him.
Yeah.
So he is actively looking for a place. So whether that's 6 months from now and he moves out or 2 years from now, like there's a time frame on it. And keep in mind, again, this was an off-market thing. These are the compromises that you have to figure out to make a deal get done. To be honest, I don't think we could have offered him more money. Not that, frankly, you and I probably wouldn't have.
Yeah.
We knew where we wanted to be. I don't think he would have taken more money. He would rather have had more time at the house than he would money.
Yeah. Well, and transparently, so we came up twice, from our first initial offer.
And I don't do that often.
And extended his time to stay there pretty significantly. And frankly, the pressure was put on when we found out, like, hey, a broker was going to come in and put it on the market.
Put it back on the market.
And you and I are looking at each other like, we can't let that happen. It will go. Mm-hmm. It'll go. Somebody will realize the potential for it.
Yeah. And at that point, we'd already been on it. We sold ourselves on it. Once you see. We
were all in. We were going for it.
Man, it's so funny. There's been a few. Frank, I've been blessed enough that I fall in love with properties fast. You know this.
Yeah.
I didn't feel that pressure on any of the farms we first looked at, which is kind of interesting because maybe it's just I'm good at the pre-work before I get on them. But the farms I own, I've known immediately, almost before standing on them. To your point, it was reconfirmation.
I think we both knew on this one. I don't know why, because I'm not one to fall in love with farms like at all. Mm-hmm. This one felt right.
Yeah, I feel like you were almost more sold on it than I was.
We were gonna get it, and I was like, I just want to see what the house looks like.
Yeah, that was a huge piece of our investment. So let me touch on that because I think this is important. First of all, I guess I own one property. It's my bigger Kentucky farm that doesn't have a house on it. It's got some structures, but that's because I have a cabin. All my properties, I have a place to stay on, or close by. Like in Kentucky, I've got 2 farms there. Number one, I think that's it. Even though we have a little bit of a gap here because he's going to be staying there, that's super valuable.
Huge.
Are you going to pay more money for the property? Yes. But to have a property where you can just go and stay on and you're there, dude, I will tell you that you will use that property.
Well, we've done it.
Way more.
You and I have hunted places that we stayed like in hotels a lot.
It's rough.
And it's fun. It's part of the adventure. But
we've changed to Airbnbs, which has made it easier.
Yeah, well, that I think is kind of an eye opener. We're like, dude, how nice is this to have a place that's comfy? It's comfortable. It's close. It's right here.
To your point, barns on it to store our stuff and like make sure it's secure. On the financial side, so I do it because I know I'll use the property more. It's easy for my kids, my family. On the financial side, though, those structures and houses are depreciated, right? So keep in mind with this, most people, when you make a vacant land purchase, land is not depreciated. There is no depreciation on land. So if you buy a piece of property that has no structures on it, there is no tax break in depreciation, which is a huge, huge part of an investment strategy. If you're going to buy a piece of property, you want the cash flow and the depreciation to basically balance itself to where you're making enough money to pay for the property, but you're not showing any profit from a tax standpoint, right? It's a wash. You can't do that with vacant land if it's income producing and you don't have depreciation. So the nice thing about this, even though they're not fancy houses and things like that, is we've got 2 pole barns and a house that will be...
Yeah, trust us. It's not a fancy house.
No.
This house was built in the 1940s.
Yep. Foundation was redone in the 70s, I think, or 80s.
She's old. And them barns have been pulled full of crap, for...
So there's not a ton there, but that will be depreciated across the length of our mortgage. Or 20 years or so. And then, so every year, as we're getting income from CRP and other things, the depreciation will wash that. And so we will be making money, but not showing profit for taxes, if that makes sense to everybody. The other thing, again, same line, and we talked about this with Ohio, if you listen to the Abata Farm, is we will do a timber tax basis on this place. There is some good black walnut. I don't know how much yet. We're naive to that, but we will take the walnut off of it in certain areas. That will be tax-free income as well. So we don't have taxes there. So because of the CRP and the tillable, because of the timber and the way that the depreciation and the timber base is set up, we will be making money on this property with no showing of tax implications. That's maybe hard for somebody to wrap their head around that only has a primary residence, but it's
generating money, not necessarily profiting.
Correct.
It still is going to cost us money on a monthly basis to make payments.
Yeah, and I mean, it's really what you're trying to do, especially in this environment, is your premium payments are going to equity of the asset. That's not that to me, I never even look at that cost. Like, you have to be able to cash flow it. It's just, how can this income that's coming in offset my interest, right? And so on the short term, if the money coming in from my CRP can offset my interest payments, then I'm making payments to the principal and I'm getting equity in the property.
Yeah.
On the flip side of that, long term, right? If my appreciation of the land, like if land values are increasing annually as much as my interest is, then that's the wash, and I am making money on the property via the CRP. A lot of moving pieces there. And if you ever have questions, just message Jared and I. We're not financial advisors, but we'll give you our 2 cents. But if you, when I walk those properties, right, those are the boxes I'm looking. Like, what's the timber look like? Is there money there? What is there structures to depreciate? My Kentucky farm that has no house has some barns that I depreciate. It's not much money, but there's some depreciation there. Yep. So like, those are the things that I start to go through in my head from the financial side. And it's so hard to separate when you find a good property, the one that you're like, man, this is going to be a great hunting property. You got to take a breath and go back to the financials and just make sure it makes sense. Because if you're buying it purely from a hunting side and you're paying market value, I worry about that.
There's plenty of stuff that's over our heads too. I mean, we were talking even right before we got on this podcast about, like, what can you write on? So we bought this, property under 2 businesses, one that I own and one that you own.
Yep. Our land holding
companies, basically. It's like, okay, so it's a company, it's an LLC. Like, can I buy a 4-wheeler to maintenance the property? And is that a write-off? Can I depreciate that? And that has a different rate of depreciation and all that stuff. So, I mean, I think there's some simple answers to that, but there's some stuff that
complex
we're going to be figuring out as we kind of go.
Yeah, and so it's
Speaking too of, you didn't say specifically, but like exit strategy. You're talking about depreciation of the house and like in the grand scheme of all these things, like, hey, if the deer market goes away, if all this stuff, it would be dumb of us not to look at exit strategies for this property as well.
The HUNTR Podcast is brought to you by Stealth Cam.
Dude, where would we be without our cell cams?
I would definitely be divorced at this point.
Yeah, I hear that.
I mean, the fact is I spent more time checking cameras than I actually did hunting prior to cell cameras. Now, at least, my wife can enjoy me being in the comfort of my own home, buried in my phone, checking those pictures.
Yeah, 100%. And dude, when it comes to trail cameras and definitely cell cameras, reliability is, I think, the number one thing that we're looking for. Stealth Cam just has a long reputation of reliable cameras, and ultimately that is the most important thing to us. They have to work.
In terms of reliability, there's not a better camera on the market than Stealth Cam, whether you're talking about the Fusion X, the Reactor, or the DS4K Transmit. And most of them are under $200.
Stealthcam.com. Check them out.
Yeah. So in the exit strategy stuff, and again, our hope is this becomes our like Illinois Midwestern buck hunting camp.
Yeah.
And like,
yeah, let's be clear. We didn't buy this to flip it and sell it.
No. You want to buy it?
It may be for sale at some point, but
Yeah.
I mean, anything, our
anything.
plan is to, have it be a good investment in the meantime and to enjoy.
It's a tangible investment for us. Yeah. So, exit strategies. Yeah. You never know. You just always want to have an out opportunity. So the nice thing is because this has a house, right, that there's potential of just even subdividing the house and some acreage off and selling that. Like if we needed to buy ourselves time.
And speaking of subdivisions, there's already, I'm going to say it's made up of 4 parcels.
It is. It's let me see. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, I think it's 4. I think it's 4 parcels. I think it's 3 40s.
Which is an advantage over having it as one single. Not that it's our plan to sell any of them or any of them individually for that matter. In fact, it's the opposite. We plan to purchase some surrounding
parcels. Try to build onto it.
Yeah. But, if we had to sell it, there is an opportunity there to sell some of those parcels individually for more money than we could sell the whole thing.
There's a seam in the middle that would make sense to sell a house in 80 and then the other whatever's left 70 plus.
Yep.
Both being income producing still, both having really good access still from a hunting standpoint, and both having pretty good diversity to be able to kill big deer on still.
Yeah.
So as much as we don't like that because it's like I hate seeing these farms get chopped up. Like it for us, it would be purely like the emergency button exit strategy. Like we need to get out.
Yeah.
And the main reason for that is you got more buyers in the 80 and under 100%. Range than you do in the 140 plus.
Yep.
So that would be those would be our exit strategies. And again, what I take it for what it's worth. The research I've done in those areas is land's appreciating at about 7% a year. So going back to the people who said, well, I'm just going to wait till land stop. It's not. You wait 3 years from now, it's going to be 20% more than it is today. And you could call bullshit on that, but my guess is if you're in an area at $6,000 an acre, 3 years from now, it's going to be over $7 an acre, and it's not stopping. It will cap at some point, where it will start to plateau. You won't see 7% growth, maybe you see 3% growth or something. But it's going to keep
and that
going.
is offset, by like inflation. The fact that the American dollar's worth
less.
You could argue that you're losing money no matter what you invest in, right? Because the dollar's losing value so quickly. But
and what's hard is I'm not an economist on that side, so I just try to look at the blinders of like what we're dealing with in the States, right? Like, is our dollar against inflation? In my case, I'm looking at our dollar to buy versus the interest that we're going to owe the bank because we're financing this. Well, it's not like we have
that's all you can do. You
shitload
can't
of cash
control the
laying
economy.
around. No, so I'm looking at that and saying, if my property is appreciating at 7% and I'm paying 6% in interest, I'm in good shape, right? My property, is basically growing 1% versus the interest I'm paying out in value. So, yeah, there's a lot of different thought processes on that side. The mystique about it, and we should get into this because we don't know. It's all speculation right now. Is the question, and I don't mean this to be like an elitist or the rich man's sport by any means, but it's, what's the value of big bucks? I think that tying it into that elitist and in that rich man sport conversation is one of the reasons recreational properties are getting more valuable is because people are realizing I need to have my property to manage with nobody else influencing in order to have the potential of big bucks. And so that is increasing the value of these recreational properties. It's supply and demand, basic economics, right? There's only so much supply and there's a lot more people that want that stuff. So the price is going to keep, inching up and supply is decreasing, whether that's because properties are being chopped up or urban sprawl or whatever. Access to hunting is decreasing, which is forcing a demand on it. So there's a lot of things at play there, but it comes back to like, we asked this question. I can't remember what it was. It was one of our TikToks or something too, but it was like, would you rather shoot, 160-inch buck every 3 years or 125-inch buck every year, right? I think that was a question. And you got mixed answers from it, and I get it. Depending on where you're from, like if you're from Florida, dude, if I can kill 125 every year, I might do it. Like that's just because that's a big buck. If you're from Iowa, you're probably going to kill 160 every 3 years, you know? So, but that said is like, if, if you were, I won't say guaranteed because there's no guarantees in life, but if you were pretty much had the data to say, listen, every year there's a booner on this property. What's that worth to somebody? You know, and I mean,
answer's different for everybody.
The answer is different. To some people, it doesn't matter. They don't care. You know, maybe they're more, to some people, they may say, well, sounds like that farm could hunt 5 people and you've got a camp house for me. I could throw an awesome deer camp. They very well like that.
For different reasons too. I mean, it has to do with like your level of disposable income on one end of the spectrum. And on the other end, it's just your obsession with it or the passion, you know, and ours is clearly more on this side. It's not like we just have all this money to throw at it.
That's why we were figuring out how to pay for this thing as we're signing it.
Yeah. It's way more on the side of like, we have to have it. We got to find a way to make it work.
You know, and there's a lot of really good hunting out there. You know, we talked about the Columbus area that we were driving through. It comes down to like, if I want to be in the game every year for a Boone and Crockett type animal, there's not that many places that exist. And I say that every year, not as like an exaggeration. Like every year I want to be in the opportunity for a Boone and Crockett animal. I'm in the game. I'm not saying I'm killing him. I'm not saying he's even on my property all the time.
I mean, look at, we've been chasing that for a long time now.
It's tough.
You know, I've been hunting since I was 12.
Well, think about
18 years.
How
You've
much
been hunting
management?
For 25 years. How many booners have you killed?
1.
I've killed 1 as well, just 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
You know, combined, you know, you and I have 45, 50 years of trying to kill booners.
We've got 1 each.
And we got 1 each.
Mm-hmm. I've seen some, you know. I've seen a 200. I've seen probably 1 200 in my life.
Mm-hmm.
I
never have.
You know, I've killed 160. I've killed several north of 155.
Yeah.
And I will not, because I'm making it not as what we're talking about, bow kills too. Booners with a bow, which is freaking tough, dude. Yeah. Super tough. But yeah, I mean, I think that when it comes down to it, that's a great way to look at it. Is like that's a lot of years of hunting for 2 booners.
Well, just got to get across the point of how
they're rare,
hard
man.
it is. Well, and from our situation specifically, you know, we're from Pennsylvania. There aren't many booners who get killed here. Mm-hmm. And, you know, there aren't a lot of guys that are, you know, either able or willing to go to where they are. So we're kind of like in this extremely small group. I mean, I don't know. You could argue that group is growing, you know, guys that will go out and look for them, which is cool. But they're tough to come by. Just no matter how you look at it.
And I think it comes down to also expectation of where you're at. Like, would I love to kill Boone and Crockett deer on my Kentucky places? Yes.
Is it ever going to happen?
Probably not.
Probably not.
You know, if I kill 150s on that place, like a mature 150, that's like a freaking trophy. I mean, that buck behind you is a 162 from the Pennsylvania mountain. I don't know. I saw 1 deer. I hunted 1 deer that was bigger than him on that mountain. And that may be the biggest Pennsylvania deer I ever see in my life.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, it's the expectation. The reason we're going to Illinois and making this purchase that is making us a bit uncomfortable is because that's what you have to do if you want to chase trophy quality animals year in and year out. I can't do that. I can't go and buy a piece of Pennsylvania land and do that. It's just they're not there. Mm-hmm. Can't kill them if they aren't there. And even if I said, well, I'm going to pass every buck until I see a booner, you may never. I mean, the odds are that in your area, the potential to grow a booner isn't there. And that's because of all the outside forces around you. You know, you got to fence that thing and nobody's going to that level. We don't want to go to that level. That's dog shit. So yeah, I mean, it comes back to where it's really tough to figure out how to do that. Could you or I kill a booner this year on our Ohio places? Potentially. Potentially.
Yeah.
Stretch, but potentially.
Yeah. Could happen.
Yeah. But other than that, like, you know, could we kill?
They don't come across very often now. I'm trying to remember the last booner I had on my place. There's been Goose got killed as a booner. He was what, 170? Yeah, 170.
Giant.
Clean 10. Yeah, giant. That 8 that got killed off the Thompson was 182.
He's a giant. And we're talking over the course of the last like 8 years.
10 years, yeah. I don't think there's been one since.
Oh.
Yeah, so and Goose would have been, I don't know, 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, I'm only on year 2 of that farm, but I mean, the biggest deer I had was in the high 50s, maybe 60 touching. Is there a booner around there?
Man.
They're there.
Rare is what I said.
Yeah, they are there. It's just very, very few and far between. Very few and far between. So, yeah, when you say, well, why? We're trying to be in the game for them. On a year in or year out basis. Does it mean that we'll have a booner on that property every year? I don't know. We have no freaking idea. Does it mean that we could have a mature buck on that property every year? My guess is yes. I think we're in the area, the farm's big enough that there will be mature bucks on that property every year, which ultimately is what we're after. But, if you're going to set yourself up for a Boone and Crockett animal, there's not a lot of places that comes together. And it's funny because we joke with the Iowa guys about it, but they'd say the same thing, man. There's not a booner around every tree in Iowa. And if you're talking about a state like Iowa that is the most restrictive state in the union,
there aren't that many trees in Iowa either, though. That's true. That's where the play on words is at.
But I mean, you hear what I'm saying there is that those guys will tell you that there's not a lot of booners, or some of those guys will say that, like, I haven't seen that many booners. And it's like, it's the most restrictive state with some of the best fertile soil, and you can't grow booners that commonly. They're just a rare animal. It doesn't happen very often, which really sheds light when these guys are killing these. Like, somebody kills a booner in Pennsylvania. Like, dude, that is a rare beast.
Yeah, it really does pay to like get perspective. Most people do like on a micro level, like they'll look at their property regardless of the size of it, and they'll look, okay, here's like kind of this bedding area, here's how these terrain features set up, and like that's all like micro analysis. You're all looking at like how is this deer going to move through here.
Yep.
But then if you're able to zoom out, whether it's by access to surrounding properties or, just communication with neighbors, and then even expand on that, go state to state and start looking at different areas. And like, it gives you some really cool perspective just on, I guess, everything that you've kind of talked about there, like how frequently you can come across deer in that age class, deer of that type of score, like from state to state. And it's like, honestly, it's a little disheartening to realize like how few of them there are. It's like
not a lot.
It's not just like every bedding area has a mature deer in it. It's like, all right, in certain areas of X amount of ground, the likelihood is to have like this. It's not just like they're a part of the earth. Like it's like a part. It's like I'll find like a mushroom patch here. It's like it's a living animal that has like a brain, and they travel. They're dependent on pressure and stuff, and depending on all this, and it's just like it's just so crazy that those things like live out there. Like even when I like look at it, that's a wild animal that's living out there.
Yeah,
it just blows me away.
Well, I think the hard part when you start to look at it is the fact when you talk about a piece of property. There's plenty of properties that we've been on and looked at. We're like, this is awesome. Sets up well. This is how I'd kill him. But you can't kill him if he ain't there. Like, it could set up to be the best property. It could feel like big bucks. But there's just some areas that there aren't big bucks. They're not there. They get killed at 3. There's heavy hunting pressure.
Has to do mainly, I think, with pressure. Yeah, because there's a lot of awesome farms that will never have big deer on them.
And obviously the certain states, bait states, for sure fall victim to that because of the way that
hurts.
Wealth of resource is distributed across. But yeah, man, it's just few and far between. So, our goal when we kind of set up for Illinois was like, we looked at there had to be a lot of those investment boxes checked, but in terms of the hunting side, it was like we want to be able to hunt, at least 2 of us, if not our dads at some point. We want to be able to have the chance to be in the game for like giant bucks, and that term is relevant. Like, I'm not saying that if it's not a booner, we're not going to shoot. Yeah, relevant.
Relative.
What did I say? Relevant. Yeah, relative.
The Revenant.
Like if you see a 160-inch 8-point. That's a giant deer.
Big deer.
So, when it comes down to looking at that, then, you've got your own mind wrapped around what your goal is. But yeah, man, it's.
A couple things about Illinois that like are really intriguing to you and I are, It's not, there's no baiting in the state. Not like that's the main thing that drew us there by any
like
means.
it.
Yeah, I like,
because we own property in bait states.
Yeah, it's a nice change. Nice change from Ohio. So it's a non-bait state. Not that we'll honestly maybe ever even take advantage of it, but you can kill. It's a 2 deer state. $2 state. You know, so if by chance we had 3-4 booners running around, it's like, you know, who knows?
Well, I mean, I pause on that for a second. I do think there's an interest there in that. You know, first of all, from a management level, when we were looking at like 50, 60 acre properties, it wasn't even in like my brain, right? But when we now have a 140 acre property that is a lot of cover in majority ag land, there could be some bucks that are mature bully bucks that have to get shot.
Yeah.
You know, to keep some of these high quality. I mean, because dude, we've seen, you talk about sheds, like we saw like 170 plus inch 3-year-old shed. And that's not an exaggeration.
Yeah.
But to keep a deer like that feeling like he can belong there, you may have to shoot 135 inch 6-year-old 8-point.
Yeah, and that's definitely foreign to us because, like, first of all, you can't do it in Ohio or Pennsylvania
or Kentucky.
But we often like you see guys, you know, like guys that do have access to like Midwestern ground and stuff. You see this guy's passing a lot of older age class bully type deer, and it's like, you know, so I think we'll at some point or another be grateful for the opportunity to be able to take them out. Obviously still trophies to us, you know. We're hunting mature deer.
And it's speculative. Like, I'm not even saying that they're going to be there, but that would be a big management mindset of mine.
Yeah. So it's nice to have that. It's nice to have that.
And again, on that same breath is like, you know, and hunting deer in October is a lot different than the deer that are there in November. It's a lot different than the deer that are there in the late season. Sometimes you've got deer that are going to stay, but transparently, we're in. You would describe it as like a river corridor. It's a lot of ag, and there's just corridors of which, I mean, deer are going to move up and down these river and creek corridors. That's just how they are going to move with the cover of, you know, safety of cover, basically. And so there's probably going to be a lot of different deer that move through there. Did they stick around long? I don't know.
Just long enough.
Just long enough, yeah. But I bet you see a lot of movement through the property of different types of deer, different bucks.
I didn't know how I would feel about it, I guess. I mean, we've talked about the bait thing a ton, but like until we look at buying a piece of ground in a non-bait state, I didn't realize how excited I would be about the prospect that like I can go out to this place and I just know that there aren't a lot of out-of-state guys that will be willing or able to invest what we're going to into this farm to put food on it. And like, I think we'll be rewarded for those efforts.
I mean, food is going to be so critical in this area. And again, if you go out there right now, the whole landscape is food, right? Go out there in end of October, mid-November, it's going to look barren. Right, when these crops come off of the property, not only is it taking cover away,
you're down to like 10%.
Yeah, and so we're gonna be we're investing in food plots because that food is going to be some of the only stuff that's on the plate in mid-November through wintertime. And from what we hear, and again, who knows, right? We saw a lot of beds, but I mean, it sounds like there's a lot of deer in that area.
Yeah,
numbers wise. In fact, one of the first things he said, it was like, "Hey, you guys are gonna have to shoot some does." You know, being that that's the case, you can't just get away with like a little 1/4 acre food plot and that's it. Like, it's going to get mowed down before you even get to the best part of the season. So yeah, I mean, we're going to invest in the things that this is what's so cool because it kind of crosses both of our experience of passions. Is I usually don't have a lack of cover because I have timber. You usually have a lack of cover because you have farmland. We're in farmland, but we have no lack of cover.
Property, yeah. So
it's now like we both kind of have what we're used to, which is cover and farmland. And now it's like if we add food,
you're going to see though. I think this farm's going to hunt a lot like mine does now that we're getting more cover on it as we've done more of like the
correct TSIs and the add-ins.
It's like you're going to know probably where they're at, most likely, like where they're coming from. And so access is like hypercritical. It's going to be, you know.
And we're still figuring it out on this farm, but from our initial kind of thought process, we've got some pretty good access to our spots.
Really good access. Yeah, we've got creek access. We've got an easement on a field edge on another one. We've got some really good stuff like
north-south borders.
Straight in from the borders. Like you were saying, both north and south it's all ag. So I mean, once that stuff gets cut, it's like you have a clear spot here where the deer aren't. At least
from a bedding side.
From a bedding standpoint. So what will be new to both of us is the CRP stuff.
Yeah, well, I have no experience with it.
We're like, do we have to like avoid blowing our wind in there at all costs? Is that where they're bedding? Are they bedding more on these? Because there's some awesome bedding ridges for both north and west, southwest winds. And I can almost guarantee you that when wind's blowing that way, and so it's funny, dude, as I look at some of our spots, I can see how somebody would go about it the wrong way. Mm-hmm. Like, you'd look at that north-facing slope where a lot of deer will bed on probably southwest winds. Mm-hmm. And not exclusively, but they'd look at that and say, okay, I want to hunt that on north winds. Because it's good, I can access it that way.
Just come in from behind.
But the
deer won't be there.
They'll be on that other ridge.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's a big piece of it. The CRP was tough because we joke. Well, I don't say we joke about it. Like, we'll go out to Kansas. We're like, oh, look at this CRP. We have no idea. That, like, it could just be
anything that's not planted or trees. Yeah, CRP. Like CRP.
Yeah.
I'd look at CRP.
So, like, we actually get into this, and I still haven't done the research. There's multiple plans of, like, CP1, CP23, all this other stuff. Anyways, the one thing that we didn't notice is, like, we're going through, and I mean, I think you and I were both of the opinion, we're like, this is pretty thick. Like, I could see deer bedding in it. And it was our realtor who was like, well, the native warm season grasses are, like, just starting. And we're like, what do you mean? He's like, yeah, they're not like this isn't like, this is them here just starting to come up. When you come back in like September, they'll be like 6 foot tall. And you're like,
and
what?
The landowner had mowed them like in April or May, and they already were 4 foot tall or something.
Yeah, 3 to 4 foot tall.
Yeah, we're like, why do you mow it? And he's like, well, just to set back some of the broadleaf weeds. He's like, you're better off to burn it, and then those things will really take off.
Yeah, the worm season. So like all of a sudden we can see these patches of worm season that are going to end up being 6+ foot tall. And we probably will. This is what's crazy is like, again, maybe because it's a government program. We're like, oh man, we're like, what, CRP though, like we're handcuffed, like we can't do. And there are some, I think CREP and some of the wetland reserve programs have very stringent policies. But he's like, I don't know. He's like, you can take 10% of this into food plots. He's like, I would mow this, I would nuke it, and then I would come back in the winter and I'd frost seed switch through here. And it's like,
we had no idea you
could we
do
that. He's like, yeah, whatever you want to do to improve it. We're going to
connect with like the local
NRCS
representative that oversees the CRP programs, and
we have to do a contract transfer anyways. Yeah. Like, so we're submitting stuff to them right now. Actually, we're submitting a document right now to them that will let them talk to us, basically saying, hey, they're under contract to buy this. You guys can start having conversations. Yeah. But yeah, so I thought maybe. It's income producing, but I thought maybe that's a handcuff. Like we can't do much. It sounds like if we want to continue to improve that, like we have the ability, barring some review with those guys, to make that CRP better for bedding.
Well, and it's going to come down to like time for us, but like, man, I'd love to burn some of that stuff off, time and manpower. I realize you want a lot of guys there. It's you want to make sure you do it right. But seems like that's the biggest benefit that we could add to the.
Well, if we have a house that we can stay at.
Yeah. House party? Free beers?
Possibly you. Shed hunting? Can't keep them, but.
Just drive them over there.
You can find them. Can't keep them. But yeah, so I mean, it's a cool process to get into. And transparently, it's a scary process too. It's a lot of money. It's a big commitment. But. We're definitely confident with the land investment side of things in terms of the values that we're getting things and where things are going. And the more that we get into this and the more that we talk about it, the ability to have tangible investments, not everything, diversify your portfolio, but to have tangible investments like land where you can go out and enjoy it and hunt it and do whatever you want with it. For our lifestyle makes a lot of sense. I'm sure for a lot of people listening to this would make a lot of sense. So yeah, I mean it's a big step for us. We've been talking about it for a while now, and really multiple states or where it would be, and like ultimately we kind of fairly recently really narrowed in on Illinois. Like this would probably be the one that we want. It's closer than Missouri and Kansas. We can hunt there every year. It's over the counter, and so. Yeah, so this is kind of the start of it, and we'll talk more about it, obviously, as we get into this thing. And
well, literally, we have the I Bought a Farm podcast. Like, we bought a farm now, so we're in the process here. So we probably will break down some more of the stuff that we've kind of gone over, whether it be like the food plotting process early on, Frank, everything that we covered in this process,
CRP.
we may get into a little more detail as we go down the road with those things, and we're going to be learning on it ourselves. So it'll be exciting.
Yeah, I think it'll be a really cool thing. But yeah, man, it's exciting to get into it, and hoping, fingers crossed, everything just keeps going. We've been in enough of these deals on the realtor side that they fall apart sometimes for things that you can't control. But we feel pretty good about this one and the way everything's going and the intent from both sides party wise. And yeah, just got to keep pushing her along till close. And like you said, I'm excited. If you're listening to this, we'll probably either be on it or have just been out to the farm again. And so I'm sure in one of the follow-up podcasts, we'll give you an update on kind of what we went through there.
Yeah, for sure.
So anyways, we appreciate you joining us for HUNTR Podcast this week, episode number 138, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll catch you next week.
Later.
Take me